have too much to lose just for a chemical plant to come in. And a few years later, I'm diagnosed with some cancer, God forbid, or something, and then I'm gone. What's left for my son? Why leave him in this filth? I don't want my parish to be known as cancer airless. I want them to feel proud to say, just like I am, I'm from St. James.
It's a $9.4 billion industry that's coming up not even 2 miles from my house. If I have to walk out there with a picket sign, I will.
St. James is different because of the sheer size of the facilities that are moving in. What's also different is how transparent their intent to wipe the black community out is. It is obvious. Usually it's a little bit slower, and maybe it happens over decades. In this case, there's a superhighway to destruction.
This is St. James, Louisiana, a community on the banks of the Mississippi River that's surrounded by chemical plants and pipelines. It's part of an 85-mile stretch that has come to be known as Cancer Alley because of the elevated rates of cancer here. The plants mostly make plastics, things like grocery bags, polyester clothing, plastic bottles, and playground equipment. St. James is also the final planned section of the Dakota Access Pipeline, the same one that crosses through the Standing Rock Reservation in North Dakota. As these industries have moved into the community, they bought out some of the owners of the sugarcane plantations that have long dominated these riverbanks. Many of those left are black, low income, and stuck amid these plastic-making factories. For years, residents didn't realize the potential effects that these plants might have on their health and livelihoods. But some in the community are waking up.
Justice is mine. Justice is mine.
One is Chastity White, who has lived in St. James her entire life.
If you ride along this Highway 18, you would see it's really bad. We loaded with chemical plants along this river road from one end to the other, and it's not just one or two here. No, they're putting 4, 5, 6, 7 in one spot. And most of the chemical plants are in African American communities.
Chastity's former high school, located just a few doors down from her home, was recently sold for $10.1 million to a chemical manufacturer. A replacement high school opened, but it's 10 miles away in a neighboring district. But that project pales in comparison to the so-called Sunshine Project being planned a few miles up the road. The Taiwanese plastics manufacturer Formosa is getting ready to build a $9.4 billion chemical complex. Nearby, the Bayou Bridge pipeline is being put in by Energy Transfer Partners.
This, not just the same company, but it is the same pipeline. So it starts in North Dakota, an indigenous land, and ends here in St. James Parish in an area that includes a free town, which was founded by newly emancipated slaves.
This is Ann Rolfes. She's the executive director of the Louisiana Bucket Brigade, a group that works with communities to stop petrochemical pollution.
You know, St. James is the living example of environmental racism. The parish is about 50-50 black and white. This district, where we are, is 87% African American. It's the highest percentage of African Americans in the parish. And where are they putting all the facilities? In this district, right? Environmental racism means you put things where black and brown people live. You put pollution where black and brown people live.
This is not just an issue in Louisiana. Studies show that African Americans face disproportionate rates of lead poisoning and asthma and are more likely to live in places with polluted air. Let's take Chester, Pennsylvania, for example. The city is 75% black. It's home to one of the largest trash burning plants in the country. It also has triple the rate of asthma, a 24% higher rate of lung cancer, and a 64% higher rate of ovarian cancer than the rest of Pennsylvania. And remember Flint? The predominantly black Michigan city had poisoned water coming through its pipes as a result of state officials trying to save money. People there are still drinking bottled water. The federal government actually has an Office of Environmental Justice, though President Trump has proposed cutting it from the federal budget. George H.W. Bush's administration formed it, initially as the Office of Environmental Equity. Evidence had emerged that air pollution, lead, and hazardous materials had a disproportionate effect on the poor and communities of color.
Too often, the poor and powerless are taken advantage of, not only by the polluters, but also by the policymakers, that it's time to put this to an end.
This office provides grants to communities to help address environmental and public health problems. In some cases, it's worked, but it hasn't stopped polluters from coming to places like St. James.
How are political interests aligned with the interests of the factories?
What's interesting is that you have a lot of the same dynamics at play now that you had back during the plantation days. So during the plantation days, the plantation owners needed access to the river, which we've got here. They needed big tracts of land, which industry today also needs. And in both cases, they needed a compliant political system. So then, obviously, our state facilitated slavery and allowed it. And these days, our state facilitates the siting of these polluting plants in black neighborhoods. There's no way that industries could do it if they did not have the assistance of our state.
A state representative sent us a statement about the benefits of these industries. Process industries are one of the key industry sectors for growing and sustaining Louisiana's economy, and chemical manufacturers and refineries have been attracted to numerous locations in Louisiana. Our state's advantages in workforce talent, infrastructure, and available natural resources have led many international companies in this sector to establish or expand operations along the Mississippi River and in southwest Louisiana. A spokesperson from Formosa confirmed that the company worked with the state's economic development arm to select the St. James site. The community's proximity to the river and area pipelines also enticed them. But many of the community members don't feel this economic boom. They feel the effects of the chemicals in their health and everyday life.
What does it smell like?
Sometimes it smells like ammonia. Sometimes it smells like rotten egg. Sometimes it's just a smell that you just can't describe.
I wasn't there long, but I smelled it too. People in our crew complained of headaches and lightheadedness. I went to talk with Sharon Levine, who lives in the shadows of some of these plants.
We have so many people with cancer. We just buried a friend of mine 2 weeks ago with colon cancer. I have a friend of mine that died with an upper respiratory infection. His name was Keith. I have his picture in the house. Whenever I go to March, I bring his picture. And then my grandson went to the doctor Monday because he couldn't breathe. He's 6 years old, Elijah. He couldn't breathe. When I was a little girl, I didn't have any sickness, nothing at all. We didn't have industry back then. My daddy raised our foods. He raised our vegetables, animals, and everything. We ate from the land. We always had fresh vegetables and fresh meat. And now we don't have anyone to raise anything because the industry is killing it.
Sharon's friend Irma Smith used to work in a plant and has survived cancer. But now she finds herself with terrible respiratory issues.
I have worked in the plant. I'm a cancer patient, a breast cancer patient. And with cancer, they heal some, but their body never heal. God gonna help us because we got enough around here, not just sinus that people feel from these plant and things. Your eyes be burning. You wonder why your eyes are all red. Why should these people come from all over to build over in our community?
According to the EPA, St. James and the surrounding areas do have elevated cancer risks. Still, it's been difficult for those from this part of Louisiana to prove that their sickness is linked to pollution.
You can go from house to house. This one has cancer, that one has cancer, there's a different form of cancer right there. And so it's anecdotal. And the industry tries to say, oh, well, you have no studies, you have no information. But we're relying on people's observation. And what is the first step of the scientific process? It's observation. So if there were any real interest in understanding what was happening around here, our state and industry would be seizing upon people's observations and trying to find out more.
State officials told us that all of Louisiana is in compliance with national air quality standards. The state also emphasizes the jobs that these industries bring.
And we're talking about 9,200 permanent jobs associated with this project. We don't talk numbers like this very often in Louisiana.
One of the big things that these plants say and the politicians who support the industry will say is that this brings jobs to the community.
They won't give it to us.
Chastity and others have told us that those who come in and build these pipelines and plants usually have license plates from out of state. And for rent signs dot the sides of the road, offering short-term housing to those who come and build. Sharon started a group called Rise St. James to raise awareness about proposed industrial projects. They educate the community on how to report smells and pollution, and they're working to stop plants like Formosa.
They would come to the meeting and tell us, this industry is coming in, this one coming in. And I would get more madder and madder inside. I'd go home and cry sometime. And I said, dear Lord, how can we fight this? And so that's why we came up with Rise. And we're going to rise. I know it. And I just feel it. The plane is not coming.
Sharon's brother Milton has lived in St. James his entire life, but he says that it took a long time for him to realize how problematic the industry is.
When I was working for Shell in the 80s, I was told that from Baton Rouge to Old New Orleans was Cancer Alley, and didn't really appeal to me at that time, but now I understand it better, that what it is doing to the people that live here. And the majority of the people that are being affected in our area are blacks, because all the majority of the whites have left. They have paid them well for their property, and they move out and live somewhere else. We're fighting big cats, not little cats.
Mm-hmm. Look, this is all pretty depressing, but one thing that we always turn to is that in this part of the world, along the Mississippi River, is the largest slave revolt in U.S. history. And the way that we think about it is, you know, the challenge of taking apart slavery was much greater even than facing these billion-dollar companies. And they won, ultimately, right? And we're going to win, ultimately. We know we don't know how that's going to happen, but bigger things have been beaten.
Justice is mine. Justice today is mine.